I always thought the night before my daughter's senior prom would be filled with excitement and joy. Instead, I was woken by a blood-curdling scream. I ran into her room to find her completely bald, her beautiful blonde hair lying in heaps on her pillow. Her 8-year-old sister was the culprit, and her reason for doing it would unravel a nightmare that had been living under my own roof. The scream that tore through the pre-dawn silence of our home was primal, a sound of pure, unadulterated horror that jolted me from a deep sleep. It was Kayla's voice. My heart hammered against my ribs as I threw back the covers. My husband, Mark, already halfway out of bed beside me. Every parent has a deep-seated fear of that kind of scream, the kind that signals something is terribly, fundamentally wrong. I stumbled down the hallway, my mind a chaotic whirlwind of worst-case scenarios, an intruder, a fall, a fire. But nothing could have prepared me for the scene inside her bedroom. The room was bathed in the soft, gray light of early morning, and in the center of it stood my 17-year-old daughter, Kayla, her hands pressed to her head, her body trembling. Where her long, honey-blonde hair should have been, there was only skin. She was completely, shockingly bald. The remnants of her hair, the hair I had brushed and braided since she was a toddler, were scattered across her white pillowcase like golden straw. She was sobbing uncontrollably, gasping for breath between ragged, tearing sounds of grief. "She did it," Kayla wailed, her voice thick and broken. She must have shaved my head while I was sleeping." She staggered towards her bathroom, her legs unsteady, and when she caught sight of her own reflection in the mirror, a new wave of screams, even louder and more piercing than the first, erupted from her. Prom was tonight. 8 hours from now, she was supposed to be walking into the ballroom, a shoo-in for prom queen, her dress hanging pristine in the closet. Now, her dream night, a milestone she had been planning for years, was utterly, irrevocably ruined. "Where is Reese?" I demanded, my own voice tight with a rising tide of disbelief and fury. Mark found her. Our 8-year-old was sitting quietly on her own bed, still clad in her pink unicorn pajamas, looking small and solemn. On her nightstand, next to a half-full glass of water, sat my husband's electric razor. The charge light was blinking faintly. What did you do?" I asked, my voice shaking as I fought to keep from screaming. In the background, Kayla's desperate sobs still echoed from the bathroom. Looked up at me, her big brown eyes wide and serious. "I had to stop her from going to prom," she said, her voice small and quiet, the one she always used when she knew she was in deep trouble but was convinced of the righteousness of her cause. "This was my baby, the little girl who still crawled into our bed during thunderstorms, the one Kayla had patiently taught to ride a bike just last summer. This was the child who shadowed her big sister like a second skin, her world revolving around Kayla's. The idea that she could commit such a cruel, calculated act of sabotage against the sister she idolized was incomprehensible. It didn't fit. Before I could process the cognitive dissonance, the doorbell chimed. Steven, Kayla's boyfriend, was letting himself in, his usual Saturday morning routine. "Babe, we need to decide on corsage colors," he called out as he bounded up the stairs. He appeared in the doorway of Kayla's room, a wide grin on his face that instantly vanished, replaced by a slack-jawed look of shock as he took in Kayla's appearance. "What the hell happened to your hair?" he blurted out. He quickly recovered, his expression morphing into one of practiced concern. "Oh, baby, don't cry," he said, rushing to her side. "We can fix this. We'll get you a wig, a beautiful one. You'll still be the prettiest girl there, I promise." His words, meant to be soothing, only made Kayla cry harder, a deep, gut-wrenching despair that was painful to watch. Steven pulled her into a hug, his arms wrapping around her shaking frame, but his eyes, when they met mine over her shoulder, were cold and accusatory. He glared at me as if this were somehow my fault. "Did Reese do this?" he demanded, his voice low. "I always said that kid was weird. This is assault, Mrs. Adams." Just then, Reese appeared in the bathroom doorway, a small, pajama-clad specter of judgment. "I cut off all her hair, so she couldn't go to prom with you," she announced, her voice unwavering. "Because you're mean to her." "Reese," I yelled, my patience snapping. But she was undeterred, plowing ahead with the single-minded determination only a child can possess. "You hurt my sister. All the time," she said, her gaze fixed on Steven. "I see the marks on her arms. The purple ones where you grab her too hard." An icy, profound silence descended upon the small bathroom. Steven let out a short, forced laugh that didn't reach his eyes. "Kids make up the craziest stories, Mrs. Adams," he said, his tone dismissive. He squeezed Kayla's shoulder. "Tell her, Kayla. Tell your mom how good I am to you, how much I spoil you." But Kayla wouldn't look at any of us. She kept her face buried in his chest, her shoulders shaking. An icy dread began to spread through my veins, cold and sharp. Reese's voice, now stronger and more confident, cut through the tension. "I took pictures. On Mommy's phone, when Kayla was sleeping." She took a step forward, her small hands clenched into fists at her sides. "You push her into walls. And you hit her in the tummy, where nobody can see the bruises. Then you buy her expensive presents so she won't tell anyone." My own hands were trembling as I pulled out my phone. With a sense of impending doom, I opened my photo gallery. And there they were. A series of clandestine photos, taken in the dead of night. Close-ups of Kayla's arms, adorned with the faint but unmistakable imprints of fingers. A shot of her ribs, mottled with dark, ugly purple marks. The world seemed to tilt on its axis, my stomach dropping into a bottomless pit. "Oh my God," I whispered, the words a faint breath. I looked at my daughter, my beautiful, vibrant daughter, and saw a stranger. "Kayla, is this true?" Stephen's face was flushing a deep, angry red. "Those could be from anything. She plays volleyball, for God's sake. This is completely insane. I've spent hundreds of dollars on her, on that prom. I'm taking her in a limo." Mark appeared in the doorway then, his large frame filling the space. His face was grim as he looked over my shoulder at the incriminating photos on my phone. His voice, when he spoke, was thick with a pain that mirrored my own. "Kayla, baby, why didn't you tell us?" I asked, my voice finally breaking, the tears I had been holding back now streaming down my face. Stephen's grip on Kayla's arm tightened, his knuckles turning white. "We're leaving.
Right now."
"This is ridiculous," he snarled. He tried to pull her towards the door. "Get dressed, Kayla. She can't go anywhere if she's too embarrassed about her hair," Reese said, her logic simple and devastatingly effective. "That's why I did it. I shaved it all off while she was sleeping so she would have to stay home, where she's safe." Stephen's demeanor shifted abruptly. He plastered a sickly sweet smile on his face and crouched down to Reese's level. "Listen," he said, his voice oozing artificial charm. "Sometimes Kayla and we play a little rough. You know, when we're just fooling around. It's not abuse, it's just passion. You're too young to understand complicated boyfriend-girlfriend stuff." My husband had seen enough. He stepped fully into the bathroom, his presence a looming, protective wall. "Let go of my daughter," he said, his voice a low, dangerous growl. "Right now." But Reese wasn't finished. "But then you did this, mister," she said, and everyone's attention snapped back to the small girl in the unicorn pajamas. She held up a small, pink, toy tape recorder, the kind she used to create her elaborate, make-believe radio shows. She pressed the play button. A voice, tinny but unmistakably Stephen's, filled the small room. Ree explained that she had recorded it yesterday while he was waiting in our living room for Kayla to get ready for a date. "Yeah, tomorrow night after prom," the recorded voice bragged. "I'm gonna get her completely wasted at Jake's afterparty. Make sure she can't say no this time. I already got the stuff from my brother to put in her drink. Time to lock that down before college. You know, nothing keeps a girl around like getting her pregnant." The air was sucked from the room. I felt a wave of nausea, so intense, I thought I might be sick right there on the pristine white tiles. Kayla made a sound, a wounded, animalistic cry of betrayal and horror. She began to struggle in earnest, trying to pull away from Stephen, but his grip was like iron. "That's fake," Stephen shouted, his bravado crumbling. Beads of sweat were now trickling down his temples. "You're all crazy. That's not even my voice. This entire family is certifiably insane. You're going to put something in my daughter's drink?" I whispered, my voice trembling with a white-hot rage I had never before experienced. "You are going to assault my baby?" The accusation, spoken aloud, seemed to finally break his resolve. Stephen let go of Kayla. He began to back away towards the door, his eyes darting around like a cornered animal. But my husband was faster. Mark moved to block the only exit, his body a formidable barrier. The muscles in his jaw were clenched so tightly, I could see them twitching. He stared at the boy who had been a guest in our home, the boy who had been systematically hurting our daughter, and his eyes were filled with a terrifying, cold fury. You don't want to do this, Stephen stammered, trying to sound menacing, but his voice cracked, revealing the frightened child beneath the monstrous facade. My dad's a lawyer. You touch me, and I'll ruin your whole family. Mark took another deliberate step forward. Stephen pressed himself flat against the wall, desperately searching for another escape route. And then, a sudden, chilling calm settled over him. He looked my husband directly in the eye, and in a voice as cold as ice, he said, I really don't think you want to do that, Mr. Adams. And I think you know exactly why. The change in my husband was instantaneous and terrifying. The color drained from his face, leaving his skin a pasty, grayish white. His hands, which had been clenched into fists, began to shake. Stephen stood there, a smug, triumphant smirk spreading across his face. A cold, heavy knot formed in the pit of my stomach. Stephen knew something, some secret that had the power to terrify my strong, confident husband into submission. The small bathroom suddenly felt claustrophobic, the air thick and unbreathable. I could hear Kayla's ragged, panicked breathing behind me. Mark took a half step back, a small, almost imperceptible movement, and Stephen's smirk widened into a victorious grin. A surge of adrenaline, fierce and protective, coursed through me. I pushed myself between them, my own phone clutched in my shaking hand. I hit the record button and held the phone up high, making sure Stephen could see the blinking red light. My voice, when I spoke, was surprisingly steady. Get out of my house.
Right now.
Or I am calling 911. Stephen just laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. My dad will destroy you for this. You have no idea who you're messing with, he spat. He shoved past my husband, a deliberately aggressive move that sent Mark stumbling back into the wall. I kept the camera trained on him as he stomped down the stairs, his descent marked by the vindictive crash of our family photos being knocked from the hallway wall. My husband, his face still a mask of pale shock, followed him down. I stayed with the girls, who were now both clinging to me, their bodies racked with sobs. I could hear Stephen's voice from downstairs, shouting about lawyers and lawsuits, a final volley of threats before the front door slammed with enough force to rattle the entire house. The roar of his car engine was followed by the squeal of tires as he tore out of our driveway, a dark scar on the peace of our quiet suburban street. Mark came back upstairs, his face still ashen. He looked at the three of us huddled in the bathroom and said, his voice hoarse, "Let's go to our room. We need to talk." We filed down the hallway in a somber procession. Once inside the master bedroom, Mark locked the door behind us. Kayla sat on the edge of the bed, her bald head a stark, vulnerable silhouette against the morning light. Reese, her little guardian, climbed up beside her and silently took her hand. I turned to my husband. "What does he have on you?" I demanded. Mark sat down heavily on the bed, burying his face in his hands. After a long, agonizing silence, he looked up, his eyes filled with shame. He told us that 2 weeks ago, at dinner, he had noticed fresh bruises on Kayla's wrist. The next day, consumed by a cold fury, he had gone to the school to confront Stephen. He found him in the parking lot after baseball practice and, in his words, lost it. He had grabbed Stephen by the front of his shirt, slammed him against his car, and told him that if he ever touched Kayla again, he would kill him. Stephen, ever the opportunist, had recorded the entire exchange on his phone, including the explicit threat. My husband's voice was thick with regret as he explained how Stephen had coolly played the video for him right then and there, informing him that if he or our family ever interfered in his relationship with Kayla again, he would take the recording to the police and press charges for assault and making terroristic threats. The fear that had been simmering in my chest boiled over into a white-hot rage. "We are calling the police," I said, my voice shaking with conviction. "Right now. We are telling them everything. The abuse, the recording of the drugging plan, all of it." Mark nodded, but the fear was still in his eyes. "His father really is a lawyer," he said. "A powerful one. He could twist this, make me out to be the villain." Kayla began to sob again, a fresh wave of guilt and despair washing over her. "I don't want you to get in trouble because of me, Daddy," she cried. "This is all my fault. I never should have dated him." Reese crawled into her sister's lap, her small arms wrapping around Kayla's neck in a fierce, protective embrace. "It's not your fault," she said, her voice filled with a wisdom far beyond her years. "Bad people do bad things. That's on them, not on the people they hurt." With a newfound resolve, I picked up my phone and dialed the non-emergency police line. My family huddled together on the bed, a small, broken unit, as I explained to the dispatcher that we needed to report an ongoing case of domestic violence and a planned sexual assault. My voice trembled as I recounted the evidence, the bruises, the threats, and the chilling audio recording. The dispatcher, her voice calm and professional, assured me that an officer would be dispatched to our home immediately and advised us to stay inside and keep the doors locked. While we waited, I asked Kayla for her phone. With trembling fingers, she unlocked it and handed it over. The text message history was a sickening chronicle of control and manipulation, going back months. There were messages where Stephen dictated what she could wear, who she was allowed to speak to. There were the cloying, manipulative apologies that always followed an outburst, expertly shifting the blame onto her for making him so angry. There were the threats, veiled and overt, of what would happen if she ever dared to leave him. He would ruin her reputation. He would tell everyone she was worthless. He owned her. Hundreds of messages, each one a tiny, poisonous dart aimed at my daughter's self-worth. I began methodically taking screenshots of everything, creating our own dossier of his abuse. Kayla watched, her face streaked with tears, whispering apologies over and over again. My husband pulled her into his arms, telling her that she had nothing to be sorry for, that we were the ones who had failed to see the signs, to protect her. Reese, ever the quiet observer, piped up then, reminding us that she had been trying to tell us for weeks that Stephen was mean, but we had dismissed her concerns as simple childhood jealousy. Asked Kayla to show me the bruises again. She slowly lifted her shirt, revealing the dark, mottled landscape of purple and yellow marks across her ribs. My hands shook as I documented each one with my phone's camera, the clinical act of gathering evidence a stark contrast to the maternal rage and grief that was consuming me. 20 minutes later, 2 police officers arrived. We showed them Reese's tape recorder first, and as they listened to Stephen's cold, calculated plan to drug and assault our daughter, I saw their professional composure harden into grim resolve. They took copious notes as Kayla, her voice barely a whisper, showed them her bruises, and I scrolled through the endless stream of abusive text messages. Recognizing the severity of the situation, they immediately called for a detective. Detective Nora Gomez arrived within the hour. She had a kind, no-nonsense air about her that was immediately reassuring. She explained that she specialized in domestic violence and juvenile cases, and then began to interview each of us separately, starting with Kayla. When it was my turn, I presented her with our mountain of evidence, the photos, the recordings, the screenshots. She examined each piece meticulously, her expression growing more serious with each new revelation. She assured me that we had done exactly the right thing by documenting everything so thoroughly. My husband then confessed his own transgression, the confrontation in the school parking lot. Detective Gomez listened patiently, her expression unreadable. She acknowledged a father's protective instinct and said that while his actions were not ideal, the context was critical and would be noted in her report. Her interview with Ree was, by all accounts, the most remarkable. Our little girl, sitting up straight and serious, explained her rationale for shaving Kayla's head with a clarity and conviction that was startling. The detective actually smiled, telling Ree that she was a very brave girl for protecting her sister, even if her methods were a bit unconventional. Before leaving, Detective Gomez strongly recommended we take Kayla to the emergency room to have her injuries officially documented by medical professionals. At the hospital, the staff was incredible. A compassionate female doctor examined Kayla, her voice gentle as she measured and photographed each bruise. Kayla squeezed my hand, her knuckles white, as she had to verbally describe how Stephen would punch her in the stomach, a place where the bruises wouldn't be seen. The final tally was 17 separate contusions in various stages of healing. A hospital social worker provided us with resources for therapy and support groups and explained the process of safety planning. As we were signing the discharge papers, my husband's phone rang. It was Julian Franks, Stephen's father. Mark put the call on speakerphone, and we were immediately assaulted by a torrent of furious, threatening language. He accused us of making false accusations, of trying to ruin his son's life, and promised to sue us into oblivion. The social worker, her eyes wide with alarm, began recording the tirade on her own phone. Mark calmly stated that we were at the hospital documenting the results of his son's abuse, and then hung up. The social worker assured us that the recording would be added to the official report as evidence of witness intimidation. The drive home was a blur. As we turned onto our street, my heart leaped into my throat. Stephen's black sports car was parked directly across from our house, a silent, menacing presence. I immediately called Detective Gomez, who instructed us to drive to a safe location while she dispatched a patrol car. 10 minutes later, we returned to find Stephen's car blocked in by 2 police cruisers. He was issued a formal warning for harassment, and a temporary restraining order was put in place. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. The school counselor, Maddie Coleman, arranged for Kayla's schoolwork to be sent home. Detective Gomez, acting on a tip from one of Stephen's friends, discovered that his older brother was a known drug dealer. A warrant was issued, and a search of Stephen's car turned up a small bag of pills, later identified as rohypnol. He was arrested and charged with possession of a controlled substance and conspiracy to commit sexual assault. His father bailed him out within hours. We went to court and, armed with our mountain of evidence, were granted an emergency protective order. The school, after its own disciplinary hearing, suspended Stephen indefinitely and banned him from the premises. The healing process was slow and painful. Kayla began therapy, as did our entire family. We learned to communicate, to listen, to recognize the signs of trauma. Through a restorative justice program, wrote a heartfelt letter of apology to Kayla and began volunteering at a local domestic violence shelter. Stephen, in a flagrant display of arrogance, repeatedly violated the protective order, using his friends to try and contact Kayla. We documented each instance, building an even stronger case against him. 6 months later, the criminal trial began. The prosecutor masterfully presented the evidence, painting a damning portrait of a manipulative and violent predator. Kayla, wearing the prom dress she never got to use, testified with a strength and clarity that left the courtroom in stunned silence. But the star witness was my little girl, in her pink unicorn dress, climbed onto the witness stand, and the entire courtroom listened, rapt, as Stephen's own voice, captured on a toy tape recorder, detailed his monstrous plan. The jury found him guilty on all major charges. He was sentenced to 2 years in juvenile detention, followed by 3 years of probation. In the months that followed, a remarkable transformation took place. Kayla, freed from the suffocating grip of her abuser, began to find her voice. She started a peer support group at her school, sharing her story to help others. Her hair grew back, and she wore it in a short, stylish pixie cut, a symbol of her resilience. Our family, fractured by trauma, began to piece itself back together, stronger and more connected than before. Looking back on that horrific morning, I realized that my youngest daughter's desperate, seemingly crazy act of shaving her sister's head was, in fact, an act of profound love and courage. It was the catalyst that saved Kayla's life and, in the end, saved us all.